Okay, good afternoon. It is just past 1:30. I will call our bond work session to order and turn it over to Jay Chapa. Thank y'all for being here.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year to everyone. Today we'll be covering basically the outputs or the information that we received from the couple of months of public meeting sessions we had that included both the bond and as well as comp plan information. Staff has compiled all that data, compiled all the comments, and we have a presentation for you that they will go through to present at the end of the day the final set of recommended projects for the program. And really what came out of it is that there was no change. I guess get to the top line, that there's no change in the recommendation based on the information. But we do want to go through it. We want to provide it to you so we can get your feedback. Ultimately, the goal is to have council approve the date for the bond program in February. It's your first February voting meeting, which would be the 10th of February. But we do have another work session on the 27th of this month in case we need additional information that we would come back to the city council with. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to April Rose, who's going to go through the presentation with the data. Well, actually, Christiane's going to kick it off.
We're going to do it together. You know, I like to do things with people up here. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Jay. I'm Christiane Simmons with the Fort Worth Lab, and I can't believe that it's been like 10 months since I first presented the 2026 bond staff recommendation. It seems like it's gone fast, at least for a lot of staff members, and I do want to thank staff that's here from Fort Worth Lab and all the different submitting departments for all the collaboration through the process. We have met on a number of occasions to hash out propositions and percentages of funding and a project list, and implemented lots of community engagement online and in person. So like Jay mentioned, we are going to report out today on how that engagement went. How many people did we hear from? What did that sample really look like? And what kind of comments did we get? And then facilitate discussion as needed in hopes of getting that bond project list finalized and in a place where we can prepare for a May election. Just a quick reminder of where we've been. In August, you approved the current list of projects, and that's what we've used to go out to the public. So we did that through October and November, and all of you were supportive of that. Thank you very much. We talked about the comp plan and the bond program, and that's part of the citywide effort to really kind of streamline some of the engagement opportunities so that when people show up at a public meeting, they get to hear about lots of interrelated and interesting city business. So that was a great example of how that can go. The data that you see today is cut off as of December 31st. We ended the bond meetings right before Thanksgiving, and then we've continued to receive email comments here and there. And I think maybe a few right after the new year, but mostly the data you see today is through the end of the calendar year. A number of engagement methods. So between the Fort Worth Lab and CPE, we're really trying hard to engage the public in different ways. Some people prefer in-person meetings and always will, and that's totally fine. They like to engage with staff and with each other. That's great. We did make all those meetings hybrid this year, as you know, which was helpful for people who maybe can't make it to a public meeting that starts at 6 p.m., might want to watch from home or might want to go back and watch later. We also had a bond email address, which we've had before, where we received comments. This year we had 2 interactive tools that were pretty cool, Story Maps and Balancing Act. Those were available for project research and mapping, and then Balancing Act was, you'll hear a lot about the engagement in Balancing Act today. That's where people could customize and submit sort of their own individual project lists and propositions. So a quick snap of kind of what engagement looked like in summary. You'll see we had 18,000, a little over 18,000 website views. That includes Connect Fort Worth, the appropriate city web pages, and Balancing Act and Story Maps, like I mentioned. Across those 11 district meetings in person, we had 260 people attend. And that doesn't include those who watched online. So on YouTube, you'll see 1,100 more views and then some YouTube impressions on top of that. And I think that's where, you know, you kind of scroll over and you start to play part of a video, so it doesn't mean they watched the whole thing, but maybe that they saw a portion. But 1,109 YouTube views of the bond meetings. We had 177 submissions in Balancing Act, which is that tool where you can kind of pick your project list, and then lots of different comments across the in-person meetings, email, and in Balancing Act. And just as a reminder, since we are going to talk about Balancing Act, this is kind of what it looks like. I showed this video before when we were demoing some of the engagement for you, but Just as a reminder, you can enter your zip code. That's kind of how we get some of the demographic information that you'll see. And then you can pick and choose different projects, some which are named projects in different categories. And then some are kind of like yes and no, I want to do this or I don't want to do this. And then you kind of have to balance and submit. So a lot of the data you'll see is as a result of people going through that exercise, which is pretty cool. Has some good applicability for the budget process as well. So it's kind of a tool we've been testing out. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to April Rose Escamilla. She's the Senior Capital Projects Officer in the Fort Worth Lab, and you'll recognize her from facilitating the public bond meetings to go over some of the data analysis.
Thank you, Christiane, and hello, Mayor and Council. All right, so regarding demographics in the Balancing Act, I do want to point out that there were 177 submissions through the Balancing Act themselves. So what was some of the insight in the demographics? So for one, this slide shows the engagement by zip code, in which you could see the central, the inner loop area, east, west, north, and south throughout the entire city of Fort Worth. The darker purple color is what is considered more feedback, in which areas where we received additional feedback, and then less feedback is basically going to that white color. Moving on, which is shown by engagement by district. So you can see the breakdown for the number of submissions, and we also have those that did specify those that were unsure as to what council district they were located in, or just outright did not specify. But again, dark purple versus the white color on there.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Councilor Deb.
This engagement that you're showing, this feedback is directly from email or online, is that correct?
And this is specific to the Balancing Act themselves. And so we're going to dive into the information that really just, they provided just a far more of like where they would like to see the dollars. And so we really want to give you an insight of those individuals that were saying that they wanted to move some funding around, where that feedback was coming from, not necessarily the overall attendance or comments.
And just a quick question, the feedback that was actually given in person, did we document those feedbacks as well?
We absolutely did, and I'll go ahead and show you in just a moment through a dashboard. Thank you, good question. All right, and other demographics show by gender, both male, female did not specify. On the y-axis is the number of submissions, as well as the age range. So you can see within the age range, we really did hear feedback in the Balancing Act from those age 30 to 69, and then just kind of seeing those outliers. All right, are there any questions on other demographics? Okay. Moving on, so now we're going to dive into the submitted comments. Now, the two slides I'm about to show you are those that you saw in person that we were all in attendance for versus the contrast of what was submitted through the Balancing Act. So to begin, the responses by proposition in the email and bond meetings, which thank you again for having your staff and your district directors forward us emails. We were able to collect that information. And what you see here is those that show the support, were neutral, or even opposed a specific proposition. There was 141 total comments that were received. Of that 141, that represents 0.02% of the population 18 years and older. So again, this was in person and via email. In contrast, those that were submitted through the Balancing Act submissions, this was those at home, on their cell phone, and so forth, just showing a little bit more of what that diverse type of feedback is located. So whether it's streets and mobility at 4, 27, 25 respectively for opposing, neutral, and support, public library, affordable single-family housing, you could really see that background. I'm actually going to toggle between the two in just a moment, just to show that with parks and open space, you could really see that number at 63 with support. Also kind of shows some of the feedback that we're receiving during the comment meetings where those may have attended in great support for Gateway Park, for example. And so kind of hearing that type of response again, and so those were also collected during this time. And so you could see some of that between the two. All right, are there any questions regarding the responses by proposition? And again, with the Balancing Act, we received 188 total comments to represent 0.03% of the population 18 years and older. So if you add the two at 188 and 141, we received 329 submitted comments to represent 0.05% of the population.
Thank you, Mayor. Question, in going and hearing back from some of the bond meetings, did staff filter out or take into account duplicative input?
Not, because for one, if it was from the same individual and they ended up coming back, as far as just we recorded the comment itself, and that's what you'll see is,
We had individuals that were advocating for, specific projects that they were important to them go to multiple meetings. So
Yes.
I'm wondering how that information was.
we collected it as we received. So if that individual showed up 5 times on that same topic, we recorded it as such.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So if you'd like to really see more of the insight and what that breakdown is, even by council district, by project proposition, or even project type, the Fort Worth Lab team, the data analytics team, has developed a bond program feedback dashboard, and just some of the elements regarding this dashboard that will be interactive and will be posted online for the public to also utilize. You can select by district, and anytime you highlight a specific district, it'll show you what the responses are in each one of those 2 columns on the right-hand side, which is, again, project proposition and project type. Those that were in support, neutral, or oppose. We'll also have a dynamic counter so that you're always clicking on a specific item and you'll see what responses are being shown. And the responses by project type, just to further clarify, that can really go into detail on community parks, traffic signal, open space, arterials, and so forth. And we also have a second page. And so this really dives into being able to actually filter by certain types. So you can filter by council district, new bond project suggestions, and you can actually read the comments as well. And this was just recorded word for word. If it was by email, we copy and pasted that in. And if it was part of Balancing Act, that was also added on here. So this will be available and will be available for the public. All right. Were there any questions regarding the online program dashboard or the comment breakdown? Okay. Moving on, we have data insight from the Balancing Act. Again, this is specific to the 177 submissions. So stepping away from what we heard during the bond meetings and via email, this is only through the Balancing Act. So in the Balancing Act, there was 55% submitted the Balancing Act with no change. So that was about 98 respondents. So they went through the Balancing Act themselves. They may have added a comment, but they did not change, say, the funding mechanism or the funding in support of or not in support of a specific project. But there were 79 respondents, so 45% of the 177 submissions, representing 0.03% of the population, that at least had one change to the proposed bond proposition. So what exactly is that breakdown? So you can see here with streets and mobility, and this is just very broad scope, but still kind of giving you some insight. The sidewalks, school safety, Vision Zero, and street lights, as well as major roadways, had that ability to be able to toggle to meaning to add dollars or to reduce in dollars. So it wasn't necessarily like a full in support of or deny, but you can actually see where the funding went or how much it was in support of. So for the top 4 that are listed here in green, you'll see that on average, you could see that net increase. For example, sidewalks at $2 million. But again, it was part of that change. So for parks and open space, this was a yes, you're in support of, or no, you'd like to remove this particular project off the list. 138 for Meadowbrook Golf Course, for example, remained unmodified. So 39 selected to remove that project from the list, and then from there, they completed their own version of balancing the overall bond program. And then you could see here that park infrastructure and drainage, that was an optional program, so that's shown in a blue, blue plus sign at 33 individuals selecting the funding for park infrastructure and drainage. So moving on to public library.
If I can mention
Absolutely.
that 33, we think it's Richard Zavala voted 33 times on the system, just so y'all realize on that one.
Writing that in, I'm sure he's laughing as he's watching it right now. All right, so next is public library. And so you can see the dynamic between History Center, Diamond Hill, and Southwest Regional, and those that remain unmodified versus those that redirected the funding to other categories. There were projects, additional optional projects, such as East Barry renovation at 18 individuals selecting that specific project to add to the proposition, as well as New Far West Public Library. Okay, And next is the affordable single-family housing. 156 respondents, that particular item remained unmodified. 21 selected to redirect funding to other propositions. Because this was a yes/no, we wanted to also provide additional information. From the comments that were aggregated, 31 were in support, 16 were neutral, 3 were opposed. Just additional feedback is, 23 respondents would like to increase affordable single-family housing to 10 million. Respondents indicated that funds should be specifically designated for home ownership, and overall, respondents indicated that if there were to be some adjustments, that perhaps they could be made within the overall bond program. They indicated items like maybe there are lower priority capital initiatives or animal shelter or open space as potential options. For public safety, the 911 call center, Fire Station 46, and Fire Station 40 remained mostly unmodified, with those individuals at 5, 5, and 9 respectively kind of redirecting funds to other propositions. Fire Station 12 and Police Central Division were the optional programs provided in the Balancing Act, and you could see here their selection at 19 and 21 individuals for that. So for animal care and shelter facility, it remained also mostly unmodified. 29 did redirect funding to other propositions, but to provide additional insight on that for the comments that were received, 8 were in support, 7 were neutral, and 4 were opposed. And so respondents just in support overall cited animal welfare, public service value, and the need for improved shelter capacity, as well as respondents in opposition on the other side of that fence cited magnitude of cost, expressed frustration with the all or nothing funding option within the Balancing Act, which was consistent with what we heard in the bond meetings, and that compared to affordable single-family housing propositions. So individuals did add those comments in there. So with that being said, are there any questions regarding the Balancing Act submissions?
Any questions from council?
All right, please.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go and hand this off to Christiane to take us into the next set of slides.
Okay, so I think we all agree public engagement is a really important part of, of these processes, whether it's comprehensive plan, budget, bond. We obviously hope for lots of people to be engaged along the way, and we as staff try to provide multiple opportunities and tools for that to happen. We cannot make people engage with our processes, but we certainly don't want to exclude anyone. What you've likely noted in the analysis, and I'll just say it, is that these numbers aren't very big. They're certainly not a statistically significant sample of the population by any stretch of the imagination. And that's not where really engagement's not really sampling. It's a kind of a different ballgame. We often hear from people who are already really engaged in the city's business. We still think it's really important to analyze the data that we receive and present it to you. It's a valuable qualitative signal of what's important to people who are already engaged, and so we wanted to make sure that you still knew the results of those bond meetings and of the Balancing Act tool that we provided to the public. So as you've seen, there were really no significant, on average, swaps or recommendations made. There are certainly pockets of support for a variety of projects, but saying it another way, staff feels that the engagement sort of validated the general direction of the bond, and that's why Jay sort of opened by saying, we're not really recommending any big changes right now. It's time to discuss at this point and see what we need to do to get the list ready for finalization and then calling the election. So what happens next is we can have that discussion today. We have time set aside to do that. We have an optional placeholder in a couple of weeks if we don't get that work done today. And then we'll likely call the election on February 10th. We have till the 13th to do that, but we're hoping to do it on February 10th. And then you can sort of see from there, we'll do another round of public engagement, which is an educational campaign at this point, not really a what do you want in and out, but here's what's on the ballot. And then we'll have early voting and voting, where we hope people choose to exercise their right to vote in any way that they'd like. So I'm going to pop this up here because this is sort of the proposition funding by proposition with the proposed ratios and sort of some reference information that you've seen a couple of times about what it looks like compared to a couple of past bond programs. But with that's it. That's where we are. And so now it's time to sort of discuss council reactions to the list. You have the proposed list, and we can talk about next steps. So I'll turn it maybe back over to Jay or the mayor at this stage.
Thank you, Christiane.
Yes, at this point, staff really wants to get your feedback. As was mentioned, we're not recommending any changes from what we took out to the public. There was, there's pockets of folks, and really a lot of the more passionate were the same folks, and there wasn't many folks involved in either wanting additional funds, for instance, for affordable housing, or wanted money taken from one pot to add to Gateway Park, for instance, have that increase, but it wasn't overwhelmingly any really significant amount of group of folks that really felt compelled us to change where we are. It seems from our perspective and staff's perspective that what we took out was fairly balanced, and most folks thought it was a good program going forward. So we will, of course, at the end of the day, City Council gets to make that decision, and so we wanted to get your feedback and see what tweaks or changes potentially we need to look at making so that we can get to a final list to make the required dates for us to hit the council approval of a actual bond election. So,
Thanks, Jay. Questions or reactions from council? Councilmember Nels, go ahead.
Yes, to the affordable housing piece, the addition, I wanted to see, I guess on that slide you articulated, moving 5 to 10 million, I'm not sure, to affordable housing. What have we identified? I think one of the things on there was open space. Have we identified open space purchases for the 25 million?
I think overall there's an overall plan that identifies all those properties. There's not, since we don't have the money, there's not contracts or negotiations or anything, but there's more properties that have been identified than dollars available, even if the 25 million was
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I want to propose to the council, I don't know how if we can look at it maybe for the next meeting. I don't want to prolong the discussion, but if we can look at moving, I guess, 5 to 10 million to affordable housing in one of those categories. I don't know, maybe staff have a better idea of how we can move it around.
Any other reactions from council? Councilmember Beck?
I'd just like to echo Councilmember Nettles' request that we increase the overall amount of money included in the housing bond. I'd also like us to take a look specifically at how we're designating that housing bond. I think single-family home ownership is incredibly important, but as a policy for the city to only incentivize single-family home ownership and not other forms of ownership, whether that be multifamily or leaving enough options for us to get creative with those dollars. I saw what happened with ARPA. Most of us here saw what happened with ARPA, and we were able to use relatively small pots of money to make huge impacts in some affordable housing developments. So my request is twofold. I'd like to see additional dollars put into affordable housing, and I'd like to see those additional dollars unrestricted to single family. I'm okay with us making a stance and say we want to continue our community land trust, but I'd like to see that other $5 million unrestricted to go to future housing needs. That, let me be clear, could very well be home ownership packages where we have like what we did with ARPA, where we have a developer come in and we're able to capitalize. But that was so impactful to our community. I'd like us to use the bond in that way as well.
So when we go forward with the educational piece, it would be affordable housing, and we would communicate that it could be for single family or for participating in multifamily affordable developments as well.
Those multifamily, we get really hung up on multifamily, but I think the spirit of putting the single family in there was we really want to focus on home ownership. Right. But there's other forms of ownership, of property ownership that aren't necessarily single family.
Okay, so just zero it in on home ownership, but it could be
well, I would like the preference to have some flexibility if we
rental
have.
as well. Okay, so it'd be the full broad spectrum.
Yeah.
Just trying to get clear.
Yeah, but I think it's important for education that we talk about how portions of that funds aren't, that we're not just subsidizing apartment complexes, but we're actually subsidizing home ownership, whether that be a condo, which in all honesty, from a bond perspective, from a city perspective, why we would subsidize single-family home ownership when we know that sprawl is one of our biggest costs of operating the city doesn't make sense to me.
I was just trying to figure out how to communicate when we start going on the education side to the public, and they ask the question about what the dollars are for. So that's where I was trying to.
Thank you. Councilmember Peoples?
So I just wanted to add, I'm in agreement with Councilman Nettles and Councilwoman Beck. I mean, we need, if there are monies available to move, we should move that over to housing.
So any idea of what monies to move? I mean, because the monies that get moved, they're going to impact other projects, right, that are important to other folks on this dais and in the community. So.
Do we not have any additional bond?
In open space. Oh.
The question Councilmember Beck just asked about bond capacity. Do you have, I mean, if you went to 845 million, because I think our hard and fast rule is we are not impacting the tax rate. So
Correct.
That's a question.
Yeah, we can look into that to see if we can add another 5 million
without touching other projects. I think that'd be the less painful exercise for everybody involved.
We were up to that limit when we
Yeah.
moved it up to 840. We recall we were at 800, and then we went up to 820.
Right.
Then we went to 840 because we had additional capacity when we had the final TAD numbers. But we can look at to see if we can go another 5 million and be able to meet that requirement if the full council is in agreement.
So Jay, you just answered my question. You asked me where we were going to get it from.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we're joking, but it is true. That is the least painful way to think about this.
The answer might be that no, we can't.
Right, and then we need to decide, do we agree that that's the right direction? And if it is, then B, where would that money come from? So, Councilmember Hall, I believe you had a
Yes,
question.
I just wanted to go on the record as well as supporting also Councilman Nettles and Beck as well as Peoples in their assertions. I think while we didn't have a significant number of participants in providing feedback, I think, you know, from just public comment, the commentary that I have, and just what we know about our community, affordable housing is a crisis in the situation. So I think if there's an opportunity to increase what's been allotted or proposed, I would like to explore those opportunities.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes, of course, I really think we should increase the affordable single-family housing or home ownership housing, but my preference would be to increase the capacity. And if we do look at another area, I think the idea was from open space, but I'd like to see those properties that are being considered listed in priorities to see how they would impact at least District 11.
Thank you. Councilmember Larsdorf.
Yeah, maybe I'm the lone wolf here, which probably would not surprise me, but I do not support that. I think the $5 million for affordable single-family housing is, I think, a good test for us moving forward on affordable housing and a bond program. I think it's important for the home ownership, and I'd like to learn more about what these other forms of home ownership are that could be multifamily. I'm certainly open to learning more about that, but if we were going to add any capacity, then I think it should be what we always hear from every district. And that's our streets and mobility and streets, and not just more housing. Sure, it's a problem, but I don't think it's this council's problem to solve. I don't think it's a taxpayer's problem to solve directly, whereas the streets are directly our problems to solve. And same thing with public safety. So if we're going to have a wish list and increase capacity, and that's doable, then I would like to see that go to streets and mobility or public safety, which I feel is far more important. My opinion and the opinion of my district.
Councilmember Larsdorf. Councilmember Creighton Judson. Yeah.
I'll just say I'm supportive of increasing the amount that's put in the affordable housing fund. What that amount is, I don't know. We can look at the capacity, the least painful method. I do think the most questions I'm getting for is who qualifies for it, what does that look like? So that education piece, back to what you're talking about, I think for it to pass, at least in the people I'm talking to in the District 3, there's a little bit of education. Like, what are the organizations? What does that look like? We know great organizations out there, but I think there's a big education piece that we got to get through. And these numbers that we've gotten, which is 0.02% of the population that are responding, tells me no one's really paying attention to this right now. So we've got 3 months, 4 months to really educate folks on what's happening.
Thank you. Councilmember Flores.
I'm supportive of Jay and his staff looking at this further. Without that information, I can't make a fully informed decision. There are projects here and initiatives that I think all of us would agree, deserve a good look-see. And if we can increase capacity, we can do it safely, we can do it with fiscal responsibility, not increase what it costs us to, if we have to borrow money, when it comes to debt, and leave us in a position where we can deal with future crises. Because if COVID taught us anything, we didn't see that coming. What's coming next? Want to keep the city in a position where it can respond to such crises while still offering essential services.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill?
Jay, will you remind me how much, what percentage of the bond goes to public art? Is it per
It's a
project?
approximately, it ends up being approximately like 2.1%, because you have 1% from the streets and mobility proposition and 2% from everything else.
Is there any way to reallocate some of that to streets and mobility?
It's about 7.8 million. Is that the number?
I think it's a little higher than that. 10.8.
Oh, 10 million. Yeah, it's about 10 million so the city, it is I believe it's an ordinance. I'm looking at our city attorney. I think it's an ordinance that was passed that requires that to occur. So council could change the ordinance and make it, 1% across the board, which would take half of the money from the streets and mobility infrastructure projects, and then you could reallocate that to a different proposition.
I'm listening to you, Charlie, too. I think the majority of my district, from what I've heard, is streets and mobility and public safety. Is probably their highest concern, the amount of potholes, both inside the loop and outside the loop, and the traffic problems. I mean, if we can relieve some of that through the bond, I think that would be prudent.
Councilmember Blaylock?
Since everyone else has spoken, I feel compelled to do so as well. So this council agreed that our number one priority was streets and mobility infrastructure multiple meetings ago, and all agreed to prioritize more in that area from a bond perspective. We're still doing far less than what we've done in previous bond programs, and there's need in every single one of our districts. And we all are aware of presentations we've had from TPW about how dire the need is and how far behind we are. At some point, we have to get serious about that. And so I would advocate for any additional funds going towards that critical need that we are responsible for.
Councilmember Nettles?
I'll add to that. I can support that effort as well. And I also say at some point we have to have a serious conversation about our tax rate. Our tax rate also supports fixing our roads and infrastructure on an annual basis for our TPW. The second thing I want to add to when we're talking about the housing, to articulate what Councilwoman Beck said, is there were projects, specific projects that we were able to get across the finish line, such as Renaissance housing in District 8. And I also I think it's incumbent of this council to make sure that we remind the people that there is no multifamily approved unless it comes through this council body. So even though we have money set aside, those monies will only be identified to projects that will be qualified to be approved through this council. And so it's just not free money to make apartment complexes go all over in districts that some may not want those in their districts. So I think the education piece to what Councilman Crane talked about is going to be vitally important to get this across the finish line. And major cities across Texas, such as Austin and San Antonio, have done 10, 20 times more than we're doing today. But I do agree with Councilman Blaylock about increasing the streets and mobility, but I think that conversation also goes along with the tax rate and not just on the bond election.
Anyone else?
One last thing, Mayor, if you don't mind. Can we
Councilman Marshall?
revisit what you just said, Jay, about the whole 1% and the changing that? Because would we need to go back to the voters on public art, on allocations?
It's by ordinances. City Council passed an ordinance that on all our bond programs, 1% of the allocation, so the 511 million goes to art because it's streets and mobility. And then the remaining non-streets and mobility has 2% of those dollars go to public art. Combined, it's about a little bit over $10 million.
So you're saying we can change that percentage though, and change it from like 3 all the way down to 1, or?
You could, well, it's 2 and 1, so you could change so that it's all 1%, or you could eliminate it. We had that conversation this summer when we went through the different alternatives, and the council decided at that time that you didn't want to make changes overall, or the consensus was to not make changes. But that's always an option. We just have to do it before the 13th.
Gotcha, okay.
Or before the 10th of February.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else wanted to add? I'm going to attempt to summarize some of this for staff so we can get some good directions moving forward. It sounds like number one is we want to check on total bond capacity to see what kind of increases we could achieve without touching the tax rate. Number two is a clear memo to council about what the public art ordinance looks like today and what that really means. Add in there, I've talked to staff before, and this is an important conversation, especially, I think we all enjoy public art in Fort Worth. That's not something, I think we're proud of it. I think one thing I brought up recently is a very large majority of that money is actually not invested in local artists. It's usually outside of Fort Worth. A lot of them are from Texas, so that's a positive, but this is not something where you're investing in community art. So I want that on the record before we get any kind of emails from community artists that this is not money that, unfortunately, it doesn't go to them in the first place. And then the third element to this is if you're going to move money, where are you moving money from? Councilman Martinez wanted to see a list from probably Allison, if you have it, on open space acquisitions we would love to achieve that are all over the city. It's well over 25 million, but that would give an idea for council members as well. And then Councilmember Beck wanted to make sure language was clear that allowed for housing ownership, not just strictly single-family housing, but different products that are available across the city. What else did I miss?
So just to get clarified, are we on the housing piece, is it just ownership, or is it, so it's ownership or rental? Okay.
Anything else that I missed? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, Councilmember Crane.
I would just say, to add to what I said too, is then who falls into the categories that would qualify for it? I mean, it's one, agreed we should figure out how it could be flexible, but then what are the qualifications? What does that look like?
Thank you. Anyone else have anything? Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Does that give clarity? You can come back to some of that via email, and then we can have that other session on the 27th to help try to finalize things by the date that you need us to call the election.
Correct, that's what we'll do.
And then another fun reminder, you can't advocate for anything other than go vote after this is set. So now's the time to talk about this. Once the vote is set in February, this council can only advocate, go vote for the bond. You can't vote, you can't advocate against a proposition, for a proposition, staying on your head differently, just trying to keep you out of trouble. And Leanne will remind us of that as well. Okay, did I get everything? Great, Jay, I think that's all.
Yes, and that applies to staff as well, so.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Congrats, staff, you also can't advocate for the bond.
I want to make sure staff understand.
You got department heads out there lobbying just for their issue. Okay, yes, Councilor Nettles.
Are we still waiting on a presentation for?
27th for charter.
Yes. Okay.
Anything else? Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.